Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first on the hazardous weather graphic, flood advisory for the Kenai River there has ended earlier today as water levels dropped, so that's not going to be a problem, at least for the moment. And also the dense smoke advisory has ended as well. But it looks like with the flow switching around to the north, that's going to be pushing it, may push it into the Seward area, and that could be later tonight and tomorrow. And so you could be seeing increased smoke down in those areas and nothing up to the north. And no watches, warnings, or advisories anywhere in the state now, out west and overall the interior and the panhandle. Fire danger, still have some actually a little bit changed. We got some areas of high to very high fire danger here down into Bristol Bay, either side of Iliamna Lake. And also this area in the Copper River Basin has expanded a little bit, and still over the Kenai Peninsula, temperature approaching 70 this afternoon, dry conditions, and it depends who got the showers. It's kind of narrower, or it's kind of contracted back to the west here. So the east side of the peninsula and the south side, where they had some precipitation from the moisture came through, and also areas of Anchorage. So it hasn't increased any at all. Actually, it's kind of diminished a little bit here with that moisture. But temperatures this afternoon are covering into the lower, in some cases, mid-70s here, Susitna Valley into the Anchorage area. And on the satellite imagery, you can see moisture streaming from west to east up over the north slope and the Arctic coast there, along a more or less stationary frontal boundary. This has been kind of oscillating north and south with the Arctic jet, westerly jet, would bring disturbances farther to the north and kick the winds up. One coming through today kicking the winds up here over the western Brooks Range, higher elevations, anywhere from 35 to 50 miles an hour in gusts from the west-southwest. Also a fair amount of moisture in areas too falling with these systems as they pass by with the main frontal boundary. And that really no change. That continues to, you can see moisture streaming off to the west there along the north coast of Russia and also here off across the Bering Strait. And that front's going to kind of hang around up there for the next couple of days. Otherwise, dry conditions here over central and southern Alaska, and a pretty good system moving into the panhandle this afternoon. Low pressure area right there, and developing and pushing rain and wind. Cape Decision seeing gusts 41 miles per hour at 3 p.m. this afternoon, and rainfall going to be heaviest over the southern panhandle, with Ketchikan picking up 1.17 inches. That's in a 12-hour period, ending at 3 p.m. today. And Haida, which is on Prince of Wales Island there south of Craig and Klawock, they had about 7/10 of an inch of rain. And winds will be gusty here for another couple hours, so it moves through later tonight, or actually this evening. And so some areas could see gusts 50 miles an hour in the normally windier areas there. And the main low is still off the coast there, so it's going to stay wet at least through tomorrow, but it'll become more showery, and heaviest rain will be occurring this evening as the system moves through. Much weaker system out here over the Bering Sea. That's bringing some rain into the Shimia area, and a pickup in the wind, small craft advisory winds with that in the band in advance of that front. Otherwise, high pressure here, light winds over the central and all of the southern Bering Sea here into Bristol Bay, turning a little more northwesterly, keeping some clouds on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, and actually some light precipitation from Cold Bay up to about Nelson Lagoon. Cold Bay had about 1/10 of an inch during the day today. And this pretty light through here, just a few hundredths of an inch, falling with this trough extending southward into the Yukon Delta, and a little more numerous as you head north there. And also the winds with this low tracking eastward, as I mentioned, gusting 35 to 50 miles an hour up here. And that's the higher elevations of the Brooks Range in this area. Otherwise, moving on, pretty mostly sunny skies, upper Yukon Valley into the central interior, Bristol Bay. Fair amount of sunshine today, as well as Kodiak Island, and temperatures rising in the lower to mid-70s with Big Lake at 72. Thunderbird Falls on the Glen Highway, they had 74 degrees. Those are two warm spots in the state today. Kenai Peninsula trying to push 70 there. Did hit the 70-degree mark once again here in Anchorage. And for tonight, should stay fair with light winds, mostly clear skies. Clouds are we'll push into the Alaska range here and try to actually get east of the mountains a little bit there, but that's kind of a question. But definitely back here to the west with this westerly flow coming over the top of the high. Clouds, scattered showers along that weak trough, and continued rain and breezy conditions up there from the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast. Starting to diminish as this front sags southward a little bit there. Comes a little bit farther to the south, so it should start to dry out on the central coast. Otherwise, stay mostly clear. Kodiak Island, light northwest flow, trough axis off to your east. That's perfect for dry and mostly clear skies. A couple of weak systems out here over the Bering Sea for some rain pushing in toward Adak late tonight. And that'll extend back to Shimei with that next one right on its heels. And the front pushes eastward here over the Panhandle, but trails back down across the Queen Charlotte. It's about 3, 4 in the morning. Main low still off the coast with a lot of shower activity with it. And we'll see tomorrow that whole mess exits out of the state. Showers actually these showers will linger into the late afternoon, especially over the central Panhandle. So it'll be getting better, but it's going to take most of the day tomorrow for them to end completely or into evening, early evening. Stays dry, mostly sunny here, southern Alaska again, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, up across the Copper River Basin, just as it has most of the summer. Temperatures back in the 65 to 75 degree range. And some showers lingering here back to the northwest of the Alaska range here, northern Kuskokwim Valley up into the central interior. And this front coming southward, so it looks pretty wet. Wet conditions again spilling into the northern Koyukuk and Kobuk valleys and now down right into Kotzebue Sound, north side of the Seward Peninsula. And rainfall pushing eastward, light rain, and still a small craft advisory level winds there with the gradient up against this ridge here. Not too bad, but there is a little bit of an increase in the wind conditions there, but shouldn't be anything more than maybe 25, 30 knots tops. And that's having trouble pushing eastward. Moving on to Wednesday, it does make a pretty good jog to the east here, or at least a fair push to the east, and that should bring some rain into Unmak Island and Nikulski, possibly the Fox Islands there. But you see an increase in the wind south to southeast, maybe 20 gusts 30 miles an hour. Rain approaching the Perbeloffs, but may take until evening to reach them. A trough back to the west there. High pressure now building in over southern Alaska, so another mostly sunny day coming up. Dry conditions from the Kuskokwim Delta eastward into the Copper River Basin and turning mostly sunny for the southeast coast. Dry conditions, showers long gone now off into Canada. And this system here, that frontal boundary continuing up there right along the Brooks Range, so periods of rain on the northwest coast from, say, Cape Lisburne all the way down into Selawik, Kotzebue, Shishmaref, Buckland, and possibly into the Bering Strait. Scattered showers just to the south of that system, and rain extending all the way across the northern portions of the Upper Yukon Valley and the Brooks Range there. But this south, so should be a dry day with maybe some clearing for the North Slope and the most of the Arctic coastline. And for low temperatures tonight, anywhere from 35 to 40 over the eastern interior and the Copper River Basin. 40s south central Alaska, and lower to mid 40s over the central interior to upper 40s back to the west, and 35 to 40 over the Arctic coast North Slope, near 50 some areas of the Aleutians. And for the highs tomorrow, much like today, again 65 to 75 here, Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, Matanuska Valley, Anchorage area 65 to 71 for Bristol Bay, and in the lower 60s here in the eastern interior there, and upper 50s back here to the west with more clouds from the Brooks Range. Of course, with the rain and all that up there, it'll be mostly in the 40s to near 50, and highs upper 50s to, looks like lower 60s possibly for the southeast coast. And then looking at the lows following morning, 35 to 40 or mid 30s here. North Slope, especially the eastern areas up to the eastern Arctic coast, except Kaktovik, low 40, and then 44 there at Wainwright, 50 degrees, the forecast low at Point Hope, and 52 at Kotzebue. Mid to upper 40s over the western interior areas into the Pribilofs, and near 50 for the Alaska Peninsula, and upper 40s, lower 50s for the Aleutians. And that'll be followed by highs. Southeast coast, more sunshine, drier conditions, so into the 60s at least. Some areas try to push 70. And 65 to 72 south central Alaska again, Copper River Basin, maybe pushing 70 for Bristol Bay, 50s to lower 60s central interior, And it looks like lower to mid 40s for the North Slope and the Arctic coast, southward into the Brooks Range, where the higher elevations may be a little chillier, otherwise mostly in the lower to mid 50s here for the Seward Peninsula area, except Kotzebue could push up to 58.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic, Tuesday morning. IFR here from Seward Peninsula up across most of the Brooks Range on out to the Arctic coast North Slope, and VFR eastern interior into the Copper River Basin, southwestward here to Kodiak Island and Iliamna to King Salmon or so. And then there's marginal VFR pushing into the Alaska Range, covering the Kuskokwim Valley, and some of that trying to sneak across into western Cook Inlet. Then IFR, a narrow band here extending down to Unalaska Island, more widespread IFR over the western southwest Bering Sea and the Aleutians, and marginal VFR and IFR, a pretty sure thing for the southeast coast, but that'll be improving as that upper level trough starts to pull off for tomorrow afternoon, breaking out the VFR there, maybe Elfin Cove up toward Haines, but Juneau marginal all the way down to Dixon Entrance. VFR getting narrower here, getting a squeeze put on it. Still pretty good Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, Cook Inlet. You can see trying to get across the Alaska Range there, but good conditions here up into the upper Tanana Valley across the Copper River Basin. IFR from the northern Koyukuk, Kobuk valleys there up across the Brooks Range of the eastern Arctic coast. Marginal here for the northern Bering Sea and much of the western interior. IFR, central Bering on out to the western central Aleutians. And for Wednesday morning, IFR advancing eastward here, pretty widespread zone of it, not quite to the Pribilofs. Marginal VFR again into the interior, and some of that slipping across the Alaska Range here into western Cook Inlet. Maybe the extreme northern Susitna Valley, possibly. More likely Windy Pass and the Tanana Valley. IFR along and just south of the Brooks Range and the eastern North Slope. Marginal for the Arctic coast. More IFR slipping on up across the southern Panhandle. And for the afternoon, that retreats back to along, or actually a little bit off the coast there, off the south coast, and VFR over the central and eastern Panhandle areas, but marginal out to the west, and VFR here, Copper River Basin, south central Alaska, the Copper River Basin all the way to Bristol Bay and Kodiak. Marginal VFR over most of the northern central interior as well as the west here. IFR near the Pribilofs on out to Shimei and Attu and southward to about Nikolsky. And for passes Anatuvik, marginal VFR to start will become IFR in the afternoon with that frontal boundary sagging southward there from the North Slope area into the mountains. And that trend also good for Adigan, marginal to start, becoming IFR gradually in toward the afternoon. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, but in the afternoon hours, the western entrance on both passes could go marginal possibly. And also with the moisture coming in from the west, marginal VFR possible for the western entrance of Rainy. And for windy, VFR, Isabel, VFR, Mintasta, looking good, VFR, and Tanita, VFR. Portage also looking like it will be a good VFR day for Portage. Chilkoot and White, IFR to start. Better conditions in the afternoon. It may start marginal and it may end marginal, but it should be improving noticeably from the morning hours to the afternoon. I don't think I could have said that in a more complex way. Anyways, freezing level 6,000 to 8,000 feet over the southeast coast with that cool upper level low pulling through. About 6,000 here over the interior. Gradient up along the Arctic coast. And 12,000 feet pushing back into the western Aleutians. Icing, areas of light isolated moderate rime icing here up over the north slope with that frontal boundary slowly sagging southward tomorrow across the Brooks Range. A couple of zones out here above 10,000 feet. Really most of the bulk up into the southern Bering Sea now, and areas of icing here over the southeast coast of mixed icing diminishing throughout the day. That's due to the upper level low pressure area here sliding northeastward, or actually in the Gulf today here, and it'll be by tomorrow afternoon exiting the southeast coast. Another one here south of Kodiak, Arctic jet up along the north slope and Arctic coast. And looking at the upper low here at 9,000 feet again tomorrow afternoon, this will be up and pulling out of the southeast coast. And the same thing at 3,000 feet, that'll be on its way out. And looking at turbulence, westerly winds, could see light to isolated moderate chop below 4,000 feet, Brooks Range, eastern Beaufort Sea coast, and also here over the central Aleutians below 5,000 feet.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
The Space Weather Prediction Center has had a long-standing relationship with the power industry, so they've been aware that solar storms, the geomagnetic storm piece of that, can affect the operation of their systems and induce extra currents and loads on those systems that can either trip those systems offline or in the worst of cases, cause damage. That relationship goes back for several decades. In fact, a big incident in 1989 where part of Quebec was tripped offline that affected something like 6 million customers for about 9 hours. I think that really raised the awareness in the power industries.
When we get the alert, we watch the grid and start looking for issues. Are we seeing a decline in voltage? Are we seeing equipment failures? And we readjust the system to try to mitigate those problems, try to keep the lights on and keep it from going out.
Averaging about 500, 550 kilometers per second.
If we didn't have this early warning, we wouldn't see it until our sensor saw it. Getting more information quicker and faster before the storm hits, not during the storm, is a big improvement.
In the long term, I think what we need and what we're moving toward, the U.S. as a whole, is better modeling, fully understanding this phenomenon, understanding how it would impact specific systems.
Rather than actually experiencing a storm, we can simulate storms in our software and see what the impact is. We try to get ahead of it. We always plan that if there's an outage, how can we keep the lights on? What's the best process to prevent it?
In the end, 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a whole mix of operational procedures driven by what we do on prediction and warning. And then there also will probably be some level of hardware controls to ensure the reliability of the grid.
Space weather affects technologies. As conditions develop, we put out alerts, warnings, and watches to our customers so they can take action.
There's different types of impacts on communication systems, and the HF we call the high frequency, which is that band of communications 3 to 30 megahertz. But it's a very important band of radio communication because it's used widespread. It's used, for example, by the airlines.
HF radio is most commonly used for position reporting when you're going across the ocean airspace, which is devoid of radar. And ATC can't see you, so it's up to you to report your position and your altitude and your speed.
HF works great most of the time, except during a big flare. And during a big flare, that HF communication capability could be gone within a minute or two. So as soon as we see something happening in there, or we see a flare, it's one of the first things we do is alert the aviation community, hey, big flare, HF's going to be impacted.
Once we know that there's an event going on, then the aviation industry and the airlines can react to that. They can alter their routes over the poles. They can lower the altitudes that they're flying at, or maybe decide not to fly at all in the interest of the passenger safety.
So that's just one example of how HF is used, but the emergency response community will use it a lot too. It's one of their primary backups.
When you've lost connectivity between certain government agencies, it gives you that long-range coverage to talk from out of state to federal governments or from the FEMA locations to the state emergency operations centers.
So if you've got a big hurricane impact in the coastline, whatever big city, we've got the cell towers down and whatnot, we've got emergency communication folks in there. Those folks are very familiar with space weather and how it impacts their systems.
Here in recent years, it was used during Katrina when we had a lot of communications outages down there. It was also used during Hurricane Ike. There was an outage of the telephone circuits with the Texas State Emergency Office, so it was used in both of those situations.
So when we talk about backup, especially for the airlines, typically they'll have SATCOM, so it'll be satellite communication.
The satellite technology that emergency responders use could be GPSs, could be satellite phones, satellite data terminals.
Space weather events can impact SATCOMs. The impact can range from a nuisance to loss of a spacecraft. So we will give them the heads up. If we have space weather events, flares, whatnot, they need to know what's impacting their systems. Situational awareness is key. Time is of essence to these folks. Again, it's life and death.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, not much different from yesterday, way up to the north here, and not a lot of change expected over the next 4 or 5 days, just kind of oscillating with the winds and currents up there. No signs of it starting to expand at all. And for the coastal water forecasts, southwest 15 to 20 on the south coast, seas running about 6 feet. North 20 here up west of Elfin Cove and Gustavus there in that portion of the coastline, and then up toward Yakutat, lighter and more southerly at 10 knots with 5-foot seas, north at 10 for Lynn Canal, 2-foot seas, southeast 20 for for Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait south at 15. Outlook for Wednesday, northwest 15 for Clarence Strait, but southeast at 10 there for Stevens Passage, and 20-knot winds from the south for Lynn Canal. North to northeast, 10 to 15 knots, seas 6 feet in the south coast, and south to southeast at 10, so pretty light winds along much of the outer coastline here for the day Wednesday. And Prince William Sound, north 15, northwest 15 here for the entire North Gulf Coast, 5-foot seas. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, northwest 25, 6-foot seas, Cabbashack Bay, northwest 25 with 8-foot seas, and north winds at 10, and seas pretty slight for Cook Inlet. And variable 10 is good for good forecast for Wednesday here for all of Cook Inlet, west 20 for Cabbashack Bay, northwest down to 15 now with 4-foot seas there in the Barren Islands, and southeast 10 to 15 for the North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound, northeast at 10 with 2-foot seas. Kodiak Island, west winds 15 knots, seas 4 to 5 feet. Sitkinak to Cape Sarachev, south side of the Alaska Peninsula, northwest at 15 with seas running 4 to 4 feet. And the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, northwest at 20, seas 5 feet here, all the way up and across Bristol Bay. Wednesday, northwest 10 for Bristol Bay, Bering Sea side of the peninsula, south at 15, 3-foot seas. Cape Sarachev to Castle Cape, northwest at 10, seas only 3 feet, and 3-foot seas, but winds northwest at 15. Up to Sitkinak from Castle Cape. Kodiak Island, a light wind day, definitely on Wednesday there, northwest at 10 with seas 2 to 3 feet. For the far western Aleutians there, Kiskasay on out to Shimia. Light southerlies tomorrow, 10 knots, but small craft advisories around Chitka in across Adak and Atka, 25 to 30 knot winds south-southeast, and seas up to 10 feet. On Alaska Island, northwest 10 to 15, but Umak Island in the latter part of the afternoon, picking up to 20 knots from the south with 4-foot seas. And then even stronger winds, but staying under gale force though. At low actually gets a little more of a gradient, or a little bit more of a gradient develops in advance of the front. It looks like then it'll be tomorrow here as it pushes eastward. So we're looking at south to southwest or southeast, or mostly south, 25 to 30 knots on out to Atka. and then starting to come down around Adak, and then west 20 for the remainder of the Aleutians. Southwest coast, north of Nunivak Island, west 20 knots. South side, northwest at 25-foot seas. Pribilof, southeast at 10, seas 4 feet. Southwest at 20 for St. Matthew Island. 25-knot winds from the southwest. Small craft advisory St. Lawrence Island, and west at 20 for Norton Sound. Southwest 20 for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island for the day Wednesday. Seas 4 to 5 feet. South 20 north of Nunivak Island, and south 15 there west of Kuskokwim Bay. But increase in the winds here, southeast 30 knots, 10-foot seas for the Pribilofs, and 25 knots for St. Matthew Island. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, north winds 15 knots, seas 4 feet, north at 10 there. On the central coast, northerly winds now and lighter since the frontal boundary south of the area there, and you're on the cold side of the front, so northeast at 15 here for the western coast, and then southwest at 20. So that frontal boundary right in here somewhere for the day Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, southwest 15 here for the southeast Chukchi Sea. Cape Thompson, northeast winds at 20, fall back to about 15 here as you head up the coastline. Northwest lighter, 10 knots on the central and eastern Arctic coast. And for tonight again, front pushes in this evening, so the heavy rain and wind will be early part of the evening and then start to diminish, especially after midnight. Becoming more showery, but with the low center still off the coast, that's got to move through, which it does tomorrow. But showers linger, especially over the central and eastern areas throughout the entire day before they end tomorrow evening. Dry southern interior, rain with this front up to the north. Lighter rain here with that system coming in. It'll push in toward the eastern Aleutians the next day. And still wet over the northern interior, but drier along the Arctic coast. And sunshine over southern Alaska to the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.